They said an empire would never kneel to a human. But today, the Empress bowed before a man who only made soup. How did compassion conquer a galaxy built on power? Tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe if you believe kindness can still change the stars. The soup was burning again. Jonas Hale stood over the battered iron pot, stirring with a rhythm older than his exile. Steam rose through the narrow alley like prayers nobody would answer. Around him, the golden towers of Aurelian Prime scraped the violet sky, monuments to a civilization that considered him barely worth noticing. 41 years old, ex-engineer, current nobody. The children arrived as they always did, creeping from shadows like stray cats. 3 Elisari runts with clipped wings, 2 human orphans, a Krell juvenile missing half its carapace. Jonas ladled soup into mismatched bowls without looking up. He had learned long ago that eye contact made charity feel like pity. "Mr. Jonas," whispered Tala, the smallest human girl. "What is this one called?" He glanced at the pot. Someone had scratched NCR into the side years ago, a mark from a world he barely remembered. "Vegetable plasma," he said with a tired grin. "Old Earth recipe." The Krell child clicked its mandibles in what might have been laughter. Jonas allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Small victories. That was all life offered down here in Sector 9, where the Empire's golden light never quite reached. He had been stirring soup in this alley for 3 years, ever since Vega 6. Ever since the Elisari cruiser mistook a human cargo hauler for a rebel transport and turned it into expanding gas and screaming metal. 87 souls. He had been in the engine bay during the final decompression, the only compartment that held pressure long enough for rescue. Sometimes he still heard them screaming in the steam. "Hot food is a way of saying you still matter," Jonas murmured, more to himself than the children. The Elisari runts looked at him with confusion. Their language had 17 words for status hierarchy, but none for unconditional care. Above them, the city sang with prosperity. Anti-grav vehicles hummed between spires of crystal and light. The Elisari walked their golden streets with wings spread wide, biological markers of nobility that caught the sun like living stained glass. Down here, in the service tunnels and forgotten quarters, the rest of the galaxy survived on their scraps. Jonas was scraping the last of the soup into bowls when he heard the engines. Wrong engines. Military-grade thrusters, not the soft hum of civilian craft. The children heard it too. They scattered like shadows, survival instincts honed by years of being invisible. All except Tala, who stood frozen, bowl clutched to her chest. Jonas grabbed her shoulder. "Go! Now!" But it was already too late. The assault shuttle descended into the alley with the grace of a falling blade. 6 figures in black combat gear poured out before it even touched ground. Mercenaries. Jonas recognized the type, the kind hired when governments needed deniability. 2 of them dragged something between them. Small figures, hooded, stumbling, children. Jonas should have stayed silent, should have pressed himself against the wall and let the moment pass. But he saw one of the hooded figures fall, saw a mercenary raise a boot to kick ribs that might snap like kindling. "Hey!" His voice cut through the engine noise. "Leave them alone." 6 helmeted faces turned toward him. Behind their visors he imagined laughter. What threat was a soup kitchen volunteer to armed professionals? The lead mercenary stepped forward. "Walk away, human. This is Covenant business. Those are kids. They are leverage." One of the hooded children whimpered. Something in the sound made Jonas's chest tighten. He knew that fear. He had heard it in the cargo bay of a dying ship while his crew drowned in vacuum. His hand found the pot of oil heating on the secondary burner, for frying on the rare days he could afford it. Hot enough to scar, hot enough to distract. "I said," Jonas repeated, voice steady despite his hammering heart. "Leave them alone." The mercenary raised his weapon. Jonas threw the boiling oil, not at the man, at the hovering combat drone behind him. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. The drone's intake turbines choked on superheated liquid. Internal systems screamed protest. For one perfect heartbeat, nothing happened. Then it detonated. The blast threw Jonas backward into his own cooking setup. Metal clattered. Soup spilled into the gutter like blood. The mercenaries scattered, diving for cover, screaming into comm units for backup that would arrive too soon. Jonas grabbed both hooded children and ran. Behind them, sirens began to wail. Above them, the Golden City noticed the lower districts for the first time in months, and in his arms, one of the children lost their hood. Silver eyes met his, skin that glowed faintly even in shadow, the unmistakable markers of imperial blood. Jonas ran faster. He had just saved something far more dangerous than children. He had saved heirs to an empire. Jonas's kitchen was not built for royalty. It was a converted maintenance closet wedged between two moisture processors, accessible only through a door that scraped the floor and stuck in humidity. The walls wept condensation. The ceiling was low enough that Jonas had to duck under exposed piping. His entire life fit in 12 square meters, a sleeping mat, a portable stove, shelves improvised from cargo pallets. Now it held 2 terrified children and 1 former mechanic having the worst day of his exile. The girl was maybe 7, the boy slightly younger. Both had the otherworldly beauty of purebred Elisari, faces like Renaissance paintings, skin that seemed to generate its own soft light. Their eyes were liquid silver, the color reserved for the highest bloodlines. Small wing buds protruded from their shoulder blades, still developing but unmistakable. Jonas had pulled them into his shelter and barricaded the door with everything he owned. Outside, the sounds of searching soldiers grew closer. Boots on metal, harsh voices demanding identification from anyone found breathing. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "Stay very quiet." The girl nodded. Her brother clutched her hand hard enough to hurt. Neither spoke, but Jonas could see the question forming in their expressions. "Why did you help us?" Good question. Jonas asked himself the same thing as sweat trickled down his spine. He had survived 3 years by being invisible. One good deed had just painted a target on his back that could be seen from orbit. His hands shook as he checked his door seals. Old habit from his engineering days. Make sure the environment is contained. Make sure nothing leaks. He had saved lives that way once, keeping a damaged compartment pressurized while rescue crews fought through debris. He had also failed to save 86 others. "Who are you?" the girl whispered finally. Her voice carried the musical quality of high-caste Elisari, but underneath lay pure human fear. "Nobody important." Jonas pulled out 2 ration bars, the expensive kind that actually tasted like food. Last of his monthly credits. "Eat? When did they last feed you?" The boy reached for the food with trembling fingers. His sister stopped him, suspicious. "Why would you risk yourself for us? You are human. We are Elisari." "You are kids," Jonas corrected. "And kids should not be cargo for mercenaries." He turned back to his barricade, buying time, trying not to think about what he had done. The explosion would have alerted every patrol in 10 sectors. By now the Empire would know their heirs had vanished in the lower districts. By now someone would have reviewed surveillance footage of the attack. By now Jonas Hale was probably the most wanted man on Aurelian Prime. "What is your name?" the girl asked. "Jonas." "You?" She hesitated. Even now, afraid and lost, the habits of nobility held strong. "I am Lisa. This is Ren. We are." "I know who you are." The silence that followed was heavier than the condensation on the walls. Jonas could feel them processing, 2 young minds trying to understand why a human refugee would endanger himself for enemy royalty. The answer was simple and complicated, because the screaming from Vega 6 never quite stopped, because every night he closed his eyes and saw his crew burning in vacuum. Because if he could not save them, maybe he could save someone. Anyone. Maybe that would quiet the ghosts. "Mr. Jonas?" Ren's voice was smaller than his sister's, less certain. "Are you going to hurt us?" The question hit like a physical blow. Jonas turned slowly, keeping his movements calm, unthreatening. No, I am going to keep you safe until I can figure out what to do next. But we are Elisari. So? Our people destroyed your ship. Lisa said it matter-of-factly, like reciting history. Vega 6, 3 years ago, your empire demanded reparations. Ours refused. Jonas went very still. How do you know about that? My mother speaks of it sometimes. She regrets the error. She says... Lisa paused, choosing words carefully. She says it should not have happened. Your mother. Imperatrice Elira of the Solar Throne. Jonas sat down hard on a crate. Of course he had rescued the children of the woman who signed off on the incident report that called Vega 6 acceptable losses. The universe had a vicious sense of humor. Outside, voices grew louder. Closer. Listen, Jonas said quietly. Whatever happens next, stay behind me. Understand? Both children nodded. Why are you doing this? Lisa asked again. You owe us nothing. Less than nothing. Jonas thought about his crew. Thought about Tala and the other orphans who came for soup. Thought about all the small kindnesses that kept the universe from becoming completely cold. Because nobody should go to sleep hungry or afraid, he said finally. Not even Imperial heirs. Ren looked at his sister. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then, for the first time since the attack, both children relaxed slightly. Whatever test Jonas had passed, it was enough. Thank you, Lisa whispered. The door exploded inward 3 seconds later. Not from the front, from above. Combat engineers dropping through the ceiling with military precision, weapons drawn, lights blinding. Jonas threw himself over the children as the world dissolved into shouting and violence, and the distinctive sound of energy weapons powering up. Target acquired. Human male, 2 hostages. Engaging. Jonas closed his eyes. Whatever came next, at least he had tried. The voice that stopped the execution was cold enough to freeze hydrogen. Lower your weapons. Jonas looked up from where he sheltered the children. Through the dust and weapons smoke, a figure descended through the hole in his ceiling with the grace of a predator. Female. Elisari. Wings of pure silver that caught every photon in the room and threw it back sharper. Commander Sareth. Jonas recognized her from Imperial broadcasts. The Silver Talon, the Empress's personal executioner. 6 soldiers snapped to attention. Commander, the human is hostile. Protocol dictates... I am not interested in protocol. Sareth landed softly, her wings folding with mechanical precision, her eyes, gold flecked with steel, fixed on Jonas with the intensity of a targeting laser. I am interested in why 2 Imperial heirs are clinging to a human soup vendor instead of screaming for rescue. Lisa squeezed Jonas's arm tighter. Because he is protecting us. From what? From everyone. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Sareth tilted her head, studying the scene with the careful attention of someone trained to spot deception. Her gaze traveled from the barricaded door to the ration bars in the children's hands to Jonas himself, still crouched over them like a shield made of meat. Your name? Jonas Hale. Occupation? Used to fix ships. Now I make soup. You assaulted Imperial mercenaries. They were going to hurt kids. Sareth moved closer. Jonas forced himself not to flinch. Up close, she was terrifying in the way all predators were, every movement purposeful, every gesture containing the promise of violence. Her hand rested on her sidearm. The mercenaries you attacked were contracted by the rebel faction. They kidnapped the heirs to force concessions from the Empress. Her voice dropped lower. You just interfered with an active Imperial recovery operation by destroying an asset worth more than you will earn in your lifetime. It was trying to shoot children. It was attempting to disable hostiles. It looked like murder from where I stood. They held eye contact. Jonas had stared down decompression alarms and core breaches. He could stare down one angry soldier, even if she could probably kill him 17 different ways without breaking a sweat. Then Ren spoke, his small voice cutting through the tension. "He gave us food." Sareth blinked. "What?" "We were hungry. He gave us food, and he said—" Ren looked up at Jonas with something that might have been trust. "He said nobody should sleep hungry or afraid."
The commander's expression did something complicated. For just a moment the weapon persona cracked, and Jonas saw something underneath. Confusion, maybe even discomfort. "You fed them," Sareth said slowly, "before you knew who they were." "They were kids, Imperial kids. Does that make them less hungry?" Lisa chose that moment to hold up her wrist. The royal seal glinted there.
A holographic mark that identified her bloodline to anyone with eyes. "Commander Sareth, I formally claim protection over this human under right of the preserved. He saved our lives at great personal risk. By Imperial law, he is owed consideration." Sareth went very still. Around them, soldiers exchanged glances. The right of the preserved was ancient tradition, rarely invoked. It meant the saved could demand honor debt from the savior, or protection from execution. "You claim him," Sareth said carefully. "We do." "Both of you?" Ren nodded seriously. "He is ours now, our protector." If the situation were not so surreal, Jonas might have laughed. Instead, he just felt tired. Bone tired. 3 years of surviving by being nobody, and now he was claimed as property by Imperial children using laws he barely understood. Sareth holstered her weapon. "Then we have a problem. The Empress has declared martial law across the lower sectors. Any human found in proximity to the heirs is to be executed on sight, but you—" She looked at Jonas with something that might have been respect. "You have been claimed, which means I cannot kill you without insulting Imperial heirs, which means I have to bring you before the solar throne. To be executed there instead," Jonas asked dryly. "Possibly, but at least you will die in better lighting." Outside, the sounds of soldiers intensified. Entire platoons mobilizing. The search for the heirs had expanded from operation to crisis. Jonas could hear the fear in their voices. Whoever lost track of Empress Elira's children would not live to see retirement. Sareth activated her communicator. "This is Silver Talon. I have recovered the assets. Repeat, assets are secure. Human suspect in custody. Preparing for transport to Palace Solar." Jonas felt Lisa and Ren press closer against him. He put a hand on each of their shoulders, trying to offer comfort he did not feel. Whatever came next would not be pleasant. "Commander," he said quietly, "when we get wherever we are going, can someone make sure the orphans in my alley get food? I left soup burning." Sareth stared at him like he had grown an extra head. "You are concerned about soup, while facing possible execution. It is good soup. Took me 3 hours." For the first time, something that might have been humor flickered across the commander's severe features. "You are an odd human, Jonas Hale." "I get that a lot." They bound his hands, gently, which surprised him, and led him out through corridors now swarming with security. The children refused to let go of his shirt. Sareth did not make them. As they emerged into the golden light of Aurelian Prime's surface, Jonas got his first real look at the city he had lived beneath for 3 years. It was beautiful in the way that cold things are beautiful, perfect, distant, unconcerned with anything warm or messy or human. Somewhere in that crystal perfection, an Empress was waiting. Jonas had saved her children. Now he would face whatever justice that earned him. He hoped, distantly, that someone would remember to turn off his stove. The holding cell was nicer than Jonas's apartment. Not by much, but enough to notice. Clean walls, functioning air recyclers, a bench that did not smell like industrial lubricant. Through a crystalline barrier, he could see guards standing watch with weapons that hummed softly, always ready. They had separated him from the children immediately. Lisa had screamed. Ren had bitten a guard. It took Sareth's direct intervention to calm them down, her voice cutting through the panic with promises that the human would not be harmed until the Empress decided otherwise. Small comfort. Jonas sat on the bench and tried to inventory his situation. Captured by Imperial forces. Check. Awaiting judgment from a monarch whose soldiers killed his entire crew. Check. Protected only by the whims of 2 children who probably did not understand the political nightmare they had created. Check. On the positive side, nobody had shot him yet. The door opened. Jonas tensed, but it was only Sareth, carrying a tray. She set it on the bench beside him. Actual food, not ration bars, grilled protein, vegetables that still had color, bread that smelled fresh. "Eat," she commanded. Jonas stared at the feast. Why? Because the Empress prefers her prisoners adequately nourished, and because— Sareth paused, something shifting in her expression. "Because you fed her children when you thought they were nobody. Seems only fair." He picked up the bread cautiously. It tasted like childhood, like memories of Earth he barely recognized anymore. What happens now? Now we wait for the Solar Court to convene. The Empress is dealing with the rebel faction that orchestrated the kidnapping. Once that is settled, she will address your situation. My execution, you mean? Sareth pulled up a chair, her wings folding behind her in a way that suggested this conversation would take time. "I have been commanded to understand you, Jonas Hale. So help me understand. Why did you interfere? You had no stake in imperial politics, no obligation to royal children. You could have walked away." Jonas chewed slowly, buying time to organize his thoughts. "How did you explain human stubbornness to a species that valued logic and hierarchy?" 3 years ago, he started. "I was chief engineer on a civilian cargo hauler. We were transporting medical supplies to a colony on the edge of Elisari space. Your military mistook us for a rebel ship. They fired without hailing first." Sareth's expression went carefully neutral. "Vega 6. You know about it. Every soldier knows about it. It is taught as an example of engagement protocol failures. The crew responsible was disciplined." "Disciplined," Jonas repeated. The word tasted like ash. 87 people died. Discipline seems inadequate." "I agree." That stopped him. He looked up surprised. Sareth met his gaze steadily. "I was junior officer then," she continued. "I read the incident report, watched the recovered footage. Your ship was clearly civilian. The attack was unjustifiable, but the Empire does not apologize to lower caste species. It simply moves forward and pretends the blood washes off." Jonas set down his food. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I am trying to understand how someone who lost everything to Imperial negligence then saves Imperial children at great personal cost. The logic eludes me." "Maybe there is no logic. Humans always have logic. It is simply chaotic and built on emotion rather than reason." Jonas laughed despite himself. "Fair assessment." Sareth leaned forward slightly. "The children say you told them nobody should sleep hungry or afraid. Is that your philosophy, your driving principle?" "It is just something I believe." "Why?" "Because—" Jonas stopped. The real answer was complicated. "How did you explain that every time he fed someone, every time he offered warmth to cold children, he was trying to prove that the universe was not completely cruel, that his survival meant something beyond random chance?" "Because I died on Vega 6, he said finally. "I was in the engine bay when decompression started. I sealed myself in. Listened to my crew die on the other side of the bulkhead. Spent 4 hours in that box, running out of air, waiting for rescue that might never come. When they finally cut me out, I was the only one breathing." Sareth said nothing. Waited. "Survivor guilt is a human thing. We call it that because we do not have a better name for the feeling that you should have died too. Every day since, I wake up and wonder why I got to live. So I make soup. I feed kids. I try to prove that my survival mattered for something. And yesterday, You decided saving Imperial heirs mattered. Yesterday, I decided saving kids mattered. The Imperial part was inconvenient surprise. Something like understanding crossed Sereth's features. You are not saving them for politics. You are saving them because you need to save someone. Anyone. Sounds broken when you say it that way? It sounds human. She stood, her wings rustling. For what it is worth, Jonas Hale, I am glad you lived through Vega 6, and I am glad you were there yesterday. Jonas blinked. Why? Because I have served the Empire for 20 years. I have executed threats, eliminated enemies, and maintained order through force. I am very good at breaking things. She moved toward the door, paused. But I have never seen anyone protect something at personal cost with no expectation of reward. That is not an Elisari trait. Perhaps it should be. After she left, Jonas finished his meal slowly. The food was excellent. The conversation had been stranger. Somewhere above him, in the golden halls of power, an Empress was deciding his fate. But here, in this clean cell with actual food, Jonas felt something he had not felt in 3 years. He felt like maybe, just maybe, his death on Vega 6 had earned him one more chance to matter. The guards changed shift. Time passed, and Jonas Hale waited for judgment with the patience of a man who had survived worse than uncertainty. He had survived vacuum and guilt and 3 years of invisible exile. Whatever came next could not be worse than that. He hoped. They came for him at dawn. Not guards this time. Attendants in flowing robes of silver and gold, moving with the careful grace of courtiers who lived their entire lives in proximity to power. They brought clothes, simple but clean, fitted to his measurements in a way that suggested imperial efficiency extended even to prisoners. "The Empress will see you now," the lead attendant announced. Jonas dressed slowly, his hands steadier than expected. 3 years of making soup for orphans had taught him patience in the face of fear. You did not panic when children were watching. You did not break when small lives depended on your ability to function through crisis. He was very good at functioning through crisis. The Palace Solar was exactly as brutal as he had imagined. Corridors of polished crystal that caught sunlight and multiplied it into weapons of beauty. Ceilings so high they generated their own weather systems, clouds forming in the upper reaches of architectural excess. Everywhere, Elisari moved with the confidence of a species that had never doubted their place at the top of the galactic hierarchy. Jonas walked between guards who kept hands on weapons but did not actually threaten him. Small mercy. The attendants led him through checkpoints and security gates, each one scanning his biological signature, confirming he was exactly who they thought. Nobody dangerous, just inconvenient. They entered a chamber vast enough to echo. The imperial court was in session. Hundreds of Elisari filled tiered seats rising toward a vaulted ceiling painted with conquests. Every wing in the room was spread in formal display, a peacock explosion of status and bloodline. The combined light of so many bioluminescent wings turned the air golden. At the far end, elevated above everything, sat the solar throne, and upon it, Imperatrice Elira. Jonas had seen her in broadcasts. They did not do her justice. She was tall even by Elisari standards, her wings pure white with edges that flickered like contained fire. Her face held the kind of beauty that made you understand why ancient humans had invented gods. Power radiated from her in waves that had nothing to do with legal authority and everything to do with presence. She looked at Jonas the way a scientist might look at an interesting bacteria sample. "Bring him forward." The guards nudged him. Jonas walked alone across a floor so polished it reflected his shabby form in cruel detail. Every step echoed. Every breath felt monitored. Around him, courtiers whispered behind hands, wings fluttering with agitation or curiosity or contempt. He reached the base of the throne and stopped. Nobody had told him the protocol. Was he supposed to kneel? Bow? Grovel? Jonas stood straight and met the Empress's gaze. The whispers exploded into outrage. The audacity! A human, standing before... He should be on his knees. Elira raised one hand. Silence crashed down like a physical force. "Jonas Hale," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality of her species but edged with something harder. "You stand before the solar throne accused of interfering with Imperial security operations, destruction of military property, and harboring royal heirs without authorization. How do you answer these charges?" Jonas took a breath. "I am guilty of all three, Your Majesty." The room exploded again. Apparently, honesty was unexpected. Elira silenced them with another gesture. "You confess freely?" "Yes. I interfered when mercenaries were hurting children. I destroyed a drone that was about to kill people. I kept your heirs safe in my kitchen because they were afraid and I had soup." He paused. "Also, I left the stove on. If the court could send someone to turn it off, I would appreciate it." Stunned silence. Then, impossibly, Elira smiled. It was a small thing, barely visible, but it transformed her face from divine authority to something almost human. "You are concerned about your stove." "It is a fire hazard, Your Majesty." "While facing possible execution for crimes against the throne, you worry about fire safety in the lower districts." "Someone has to." Elira stood. Her wings spread to full extension, 20 feet of burning white light that made everyone in the chamber look away except Jonas. He had stared into a reactor breach once. He could stare at pretty wings. "Why did you save my children?" There it was, the real question, the one that mattered more than charges or protocol or anything else. Jonas thought about Vega 6, thought about Lysa and Ren huddled in his kitchen, thought about every bowl of soup he had ever served to kids who deserved better than the universe gave them. "Because they asked me why I risked my life for them," he said quietly. "And I told them nobody should sleep hungry or afraid. That is true for orphans in my alley. It is true for Imperial heirs. Hunger does not care about your bloodline, Your Majesty. Neither does fear." The Empress descended from her throne. She moved like water made light, each step precise and purposeful. She stopped directly in front of Jonas, close enough that he could see the crystalline structure of her eyes. "You lost your crew to my Empire's mistake. Yes, you could have let my children die. Revenge for Vega 6. I could have. Why did you not?" Jonas met her gaze steadily. "Because they are not the ones who killed my crew. They are just kids. And killing kids to hurt their parents is exactly the kind of logic that turned 87 people into debris." H.E. Elira studied him for a long moment. Then she placed her hand on his head in a gesture Jonas did not understand, but that made every courtier in the chamber gasp. "You call the hungry your children," she said, her voice carrying to every corner. "Let it be known that my children now call you father. Your Majesty, this is unprecedented, scandalous, politically disastrous." Elira's smile grew sharper. "This human showed my heirs more care in one night than most of this court has shown them in their entire lives. He fed them, comforted them, protected them at great personal cost. These are the actions of family, not the calculations of politics." She turned to address the assembled nobles. "Jonas Hale is what we pretend to be, just, and that makes him worth more than 1,000 sycophants who kneel only for advantage." Then, with her entire court watching in horror, Imperatrice Elira, Solar Throne and Voice of the Dawn, knelt before a human soup vendor. The chamber went silent enough to hear stars burn. The rebellion struck while the Empress was still kneeling. Explosions ripped through the eastern gallery first, then the north wing. Coordinated, precise, calculated to cause maximum chaos with minimal warning. The palace's defensive shields flared, absorbing impacts that would have leveled buildings. But shields could not stop ideology. "Protect the Empress!" Sareth's voice cut through the panic like a blade. Royal guards materialized from positions Jonas had not known existed, forming a living barrier of wings and weapons around Elira, who was still kneeling before him. "Your Majesty, we need to move." "No." Elira rose with terrible grace, her wings spreading to their full burning span. They attack because I honored a human. They attack because the old order sees its death approaching. Let them come. Another explosion, closer. The crystalline ceiling cracked, raining fragments of beauty that cut like shrapnel. Courtiers screamed and scattered. Some died immediately, elegant robes turning red in ways robes were never meant to be colored. Jonas grabbed Elira's arm. "This is not the time for symbolic stands. Where are your children?" That got through. Her eyes widened. "Lysa, Ren, they were taken to the secure chambers." "Which way?" Sareth was suddenly beside them, her weapon drawn, her face grim. "East Wing, but that is where the main assault is focused. They are not trying to kill the Empress. They are trying to recapture the heirs." Jonas understood immediately. Leverage. The rebels had lost their hostages once. They were ensuring it did not happen again, even if they had to level the palace to do it. Can you get me there?" he asked Sareth. "You are a civilian. You would die in seconds." "Then die with me. But I am not leaving those kids to be taken again." Something shifted in Sareth's expression. She looked at Elira, who nodded once, sharp and certain. "Go, both of you. I will hold the throne." They ran. The palace had become a war zone. Rebel forces had breached the outer defenses using insider knowledge, moving through corridors with the confidence of people who had studied the architecture. Jonas followed Sareth through chaos, ducking plasma fire, jumping debris, moving with the muscle memory of a man who had once navigated a dying ship. "Why are you doing this?" Sareth shouted over the noise. "You owe them nothing." "See, I owe them soup," Jonas shouted back, "and I do not leave family behind." They hit a bottleneck. 3 rebels in combat armor, weapons trained on a door marked with the Imperial seal. Inside, Jonas could hear children screaming. Sareth did not hesitate. She hit the first rebel like a missile, her wings propelling her forward with enough force to crack armor. Jonas grabbed a fallen energy lance and did something stupid. He threw himself at the second rebel, using weight and momentum and 3 years of pent-up rage about Vega 6. It almost worked. The third rebel caught him across the ribs with a rifle butt. Jonas went down hard, tasting copper and failure. Above him, the rebel aimed at his head. Sareth's blade took the rebel through the neck. "Stay down," she ordered, already moving to override the door lock. Jonas stayed down. He was good at following orders when they made sense. His ribs screamed. Something was definitely cracked, but his hands worked, and that was enough. The door opened. Lysa and Ren huddled in the corner, protected by 2 guards who had clearly died defending them. The children looked up, saw Jonas, and ran to him despite everything. "You came," Lysa sobbed. "You came back for us." Jonas pulled them close, ignoring his ribs. "Always will." "Touching," a new voice said from the doorway. "But futile." A figure stepped over the dead rebels. Female, Elisari. Wings black as space and just as cold. She wore no uniform, but authority radiated from her in ways that suggested rank beyond military. "Senator Kale," Sareth breathed, "you are behind this." "I am saving us," Kale corrected, "from the indignity of an empress who kneels to humans, from the weakness that will destroy our empire if left unchecked." She raised her weapon, not at Jonas or the children, but at Sareth. "The Imperatrice has become a liability. The heirs are bargaining chips, and you, Commander, are a traitor to everything the Elisari once stood for." Sareth moved faster than Jonas could process. Her blade met Kale's weapon, deflecting the shot into the ceiling. They engaged in close combat, wings and steel, and decades of military training colliding in the space of heartbeats. Jonas shoved the children behind him and looked for anything useful. His hands closed on the energy lance. Dead now, its charge depleted, but still metal. Still heavy. Kale was winning. She had Sareth pinned, weapon pressed against her throat. "Your Empress will die today. Her children will be re-educated, and humanity will learn its proper place beneath our heels." Jonas swung the lance like a club. It connected with Kale's skull with a sound like justice. She dropped, unconscious or dead or something in between. Jonas did not care which. Sareth rolled away, gasping. Nice swing. Used to play baseball, Jonas panted. Earth sport. Big stick, small ball, apparently translates. Alarms were still screaming. The palace was still burning. But for this moment, in this room, they had bought time. Lisa tugged Jonas's shirt. What happens now? Jonas looked at Sareth. Sareth looked at Jonas. Neither had a good answer. Now, Jonas said finally, we figure out how to stop a rebellion with nothing but spite and soup kitchen logic. Sareth almost smiled. That is the worst plan I have ever heard. Lucky for you, I specialize in bad plans that somehow work. Outside, the palace shook with another explosion. Somewhere an empress fought for her throne. And in a small room filled with dead rebels and frightened children, a soup vendor prepared to do something spectacularly stupid. Again, the palace had 19 escape routes designed for imperial emergencies. Jonas knew this because Sareth told him while they dragged Senator Kale's unconscious body into a storage closet and sealed it. They also knew that 18 of those routes were likely compromised. The rebels had inside intelligence, Sareth explained, checking her weapon charge. They knew the security rotations, the blind spots, the evacuation protocols. Someone on the inside has been planning this for months. Jonas adjusted Lisa on his back. She was too old to be carried, but exhaustion and fear had made her small again. Ren clung to his hand with grip that suggested he would not let go even if gravity failed. So we use the 19th route, Jonas said. The one nobody knows about. There is no 19th route. Then we make one. They moved through service corridors Jonas recognized from his years in the lower districts. The palace had been built on top of the old city, incorporating its infrastructure, but never quite erasing it. Maintenance tunnels, ventilation shafts, the skeleton of a civilization buried under golden skin. Jonas had lived in that skeleton. He knew its bones. This way. He guided them to an access panel half hidden behind decorative screening. This leads to the old water treatment system. The Empire sealed it when they built the new facility, but the tunnels still exist. Sareth stared at him. How do you know this? Because I used to fix things, Commander. And the first rule of fixing things is understanding how they are built, including the parts everyone pretends do not exist. The panel opened to darkness and the smell of stagnant water. Not pleasant, but alive, which meant breathable. Jonas climbed in first, helping the children down. Sareth followed, her wings folding tight against her back to fit the narrow space. They descended into the old city. It was quieter here. The sounds of battle faded to distant thunder. Emergency lighting flickered at irregular intervals, powered by backup systems nobody had bothered to disconnect. The tunnels stretched in multiple directions, a maze that could lose someone for days. Jonas chose paths by memory and instinct. Left at the junction with the collapsed ceiling, right where the old Elisari script still marked flow directions, down through the section that flooded during heavy rain but was currently dry. My feet hurt, Ren whispered. Jonas stopped, set Lisa down carefully, knelt to look at Ren's boots, expensive, decorative, designed for palace floors and completely useless for real walking. Here. He pulled off his own boots, which were old but functional. Oversized for the boy, but better than nothing. These will work better. What about you? I have walked worse in bare feet. Trust me. They continued. Jonas's feet found every sharp edge, every bit of rough ground, every reminder that floors were optional in the forgotten places. He ignored it. Pain was just information. You could function through information. Sareth watched him with something that looked like amazement. You really would give them everything, would you not? Your safety, your boots, your life. That is what you do for family. They are not your family. They are now. They reached what Jonas was looking for, a maintenance airlock that led to the surface tunnels, the ones used for service vehicle access. Beyond that, the lower districts. Safety, or at least the closest thing to safety this city offered. He worked the manual override, using engineer knowledge older than his exile. The airlock groaned, protested, then opened with the complaint of machinery that had not moved in years. Fresh air rushed in. Not palace air, filtered and perfumed and perfect. Street air. Dirty and real and alive. "We can get to the human quarter from here," Jonas said. "Find people I trust, figure out next steps." He turned to usher the children through. That was when Lisa collapsed. No warning. One moment standing, next moment crumpling like her strings had been cut. Jonas caught her, his heart stopping. She was burning up, skin hot enough to hurt. "Lisa? Lisa, stay with me." Sareth knelt beside them, checking pulse points with military efficiency. Her face went pale. Stress fever, Elisari children can develop it under extreme trauma. Her system is shutting down. How do we fix it? Imperial medical facilities, specialized equipment, time. Sareth looked at Jonas. She needs a hospital, now. Jonas looked at the escape route ahead, looked at the child dying in his arms, looked at Ren, who had gone very quiet and very pale. They could run, disappear into the lower districts, let the Empire tear itself apart while they hid. But Lisa would die. "The rebellion controls the palace," Jonas said slowly. "Imperial forces are scattered. The Empress might be captured or worse. Walking back is suicide." "Yes, but the medical facilities are in the palace." "Yes." Jonas stood, lifting Lisa carefully. She was so light, too light, like holding paper that might burn away. "Then we go back." "That is insane. I have been insane since I threw boiling oil at a combat drone. At this point, consistency is important." Sareth stared at him for a long moment. Then she checked her weapon, rolled her shoulders, and spread her wings in what might have been determination or might have been respect. "For what it is worth, Jonas Hale, you would have made a terrifying Elisari." "I will take that as a compliment." They turned back toward the palace, toward the fire and rebellion, and every bad decision Jonas had made in the last 48 hours coming home to roost. But Lisa was burning, and Ren was crying, and somewhere up there, an Empress had knelt because she believed humans mattered. Jonas had died once on Vega 6. He could die again today if that was what kindness cost. He had walked through worse. They emerged into a palace transformed into hell. The grand corridors Jonas had walked hours ago were now charred ruins. Bodies lay where beauty had been, wings burned and twisted. Rebel forces had pushed deep into the Imperial sector, overwhelming defenses through knowledge and fanaticism. But they had not won yet. Pockets of loyal guards held strategic positions, civilians had barricaded themselves in reinforced chambers, and somewhere in the chaos an Empress still fought. Jonas carried Lisa through smoke and destruction. Her breathing had gone shallow. Ren followed on numb feet, too scared to cry anymore. Sareth led with weapon ready, clearing corners with professional paranoia. "Medical wing is 3 levels up," she said, "through the main gallery, which is currently a battleground. Then we make it not a battleground." "With what army?" Jonas looked at the scattered defenders, looked at wounded guards trying to hold positions despite injuries, looked at servants cowering behind overturned furniture, waiting to die. He set Lisa down gently, making sure she was breathing. Then he stood and raised his voice. "Anyone who can hear me, I need 5 minutes of your time." Faces turned. Human, Elisari. Other species Jonas did not recognize. All of them exhausted, terrified, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. "My name is Jonas Hale. I make soup in the lower districts. I am nobody important, but I am carrying the Imperial heirs, and one of them is dying. I need to get to the medical wing, and you are going to help me." Silence. Then a guard, half his wing burned away. "Why would we help a human?" Jonas looked at him steadily. "Because your Empress knelt before this human. Because she said I was worth more than 1,000 sycophants. Because right now, in this moment, we are all the same thing. people trying to survive while politicians play with our lives. He gestured to Lisa. This child is dying. She is 7 years old. She likes soup. She asked me why I saved her, and I told her, because nobody should sleep hungry or afraid. That is true for her. That is true for you. That is true for every person in this palace who did not ask for this war. More faces appeared, more people listening. The rebels want to take her and use her as a weapon. They want to control her mother through her suffering. I will not allow that. Not because she is imperial. Because she is a kid who told me I was her protector, and I do not break promises to children. Jonas picked up Lisa again. Anyone who wants to help, follow me. Anyone who wants to hide, I understand. But if you can fight, if you can walk, if you can hold a door or carry wounded, then move your ass and be useful. He started walking toward the medical wing. Behind him, silence. Then footsteps. First one person, then 3, then a dozen. Guards with damaged armor, servants with improvised weapons, even a few nobles who had decided that survival mattered more than status. Sareth fell in beside him. That was the worst inspirational speech I have ever heard. But did it work? Look behind you. Jonas glanced back. 50 people followed him now. Maybe more. A mixed group of species and ranks, united by nothing except the decision to do something instead of die quietly. Huh, Jonas said. Apparently humans are contagious. They moved as a group, covering each other's flanks, clearing rooms, consolidating defensive positions. Jonas led from the front with Lisa in his arms. When rebels appeared, the group responded with coordinated fire that spoke to training overriding panic. They reached the medical wing. It was barricaded from inside. Smart thinking. Keep the wounded safe. Lock out the chaos. Jonas pounded on the door. Open up. I have Imperial heirs and wounded. We need medical attention now. No response. I am Jonas Hale. The Empress gave me formal recognition. I am invoking emergency medical protocols. Open this door or I will find a way to make you regret it. The door cracked open. A medical officer peered out, weapon drawn. Her eyes went wide. Commander Sareth, you are alive. Barely. This human needs your help. They brought Lisa inside. The medical staff moved with practiced speed, scanners and equipment surrounding the small form. Jonas stood back, suddenly useless. His role finished. Ren grabbed his hand. Will she be okay? Yes? Jonas lied. Then, quieter. I hope. The medical officer worked for what felt like hours but was probably minutes. Finally, she looked up. Stress fever is stabilized. She will need rest and monitoring, but she will survive. Jonas sat down hard on the floor. His ribs screamed. His feet bled. Every part of him hurt in ways that suggested tomorrow would be worse. But Lisa would live. That was enough. Sareth helped him up. The Empress is still fighting in the throne room. The rebels control most of the palace, but they have not breached her inner defenses. We need to break the siege, Jonas finished. I know. Let me catch my breath first. You have cracked ribs and no boots. You should stay here. I should do a lot of things, but I am going to go help your Empress instead. Why? Jonas thought about Vega 6, about all the people he could not save, about 3 years of soup and small kindnesses that never quite balanced the scales. Because she knelt, he said simply. Because she looked at me, a human, a nobody, someone whose entire species her empire treats like convenient labor. And she knelt. Do you understand how much that meant? Sareth nodded slowly. Yes, I do. Then let's make sure her grand gesture was not for nothing. They gathered their makeshift army, explained the plan. It was simple to the point of stupidity. Break through to the throne room, hold the corridor, give the Empress time to coordinate with forces outside the palace. It would probably fail. Jonas had survived worse odds. They moved out, leaving the children with medical staff, leaving safety behind, walking back into war because sometimes the only way through hell was forward. And in the throne room ahead, an Empress waited for help that might arrive too late, unless a soup vendor and a commander and 50 terrified people could prove otherwise. The throne room was dying. Jonas saw it the moment they breached the outer defenses. The beautiful ceiling had collapsed in sections, revealing sky through wounds in crystal. The walls bore scorch marks in patterns that told stories of desperate defense. Bodies lay everywhere, rebels and loyalists alike, mixed together in the democracy of death. At the center, surrounded by her last dozen guards, stood Imperatrice Illyra. Her white wings were stained with ash and blood. Her formal robes hung in tatters, but she stood straight, weapon in hand, facing down rebels who had pushed through every defense to reach her. The rebel leader stepped forward. Jonas recognized the uniform, high military rank, old guard conservative, someone who had decided the Empire's honor was worth more than its survival. "Imperatrice," he called, "surrender. Your reign is finished." "My reign ends when I stop breathing, General Voss, not one moment before." "Then you choose death over dignity." "I choose to defend what I believe in. Can you say the same?" Voss raised his weapon. Around him, 50 rebels did the same. The math was simple and brutal. Even an Empress could not survive those odds. Jonas stepped into the throne room. "Hey, General, you forgot someone." Every weapon turned toward him. 50 targeting lasers painted him red, little points of murder finding skin that would not stop them. Sareth moved to his left. Their makeshift army filtered in behind, forming a line between the rebels and the Empress, outnumbered 2-1, outgunned significantly worse, but present, which was something. Voss laughed. "The human, the soup vendor who thinks he matters. Did you really bring servants and crippled guards to fight trained soldiers?" "I brought people who care," Jonas corrected. "That is worth more than training." "Touching, useless, but touching." The general raised his hand to order the final assault. Jonas grabbed a fallen energy weapon. He had not held one since Vega 6, since the day his crew died and he decided violence solved nothing. His hands remembered the weight. His muscle memory remembered the stance. He aimed at Voss. "You can kill us," Jonas said quietly. "Probably will, but you will have to kill every single person here, because we are not moving. We are not surrendering, and we are definitely not letting you touch that woman." "Why?" Voss demanded. "She is not your Empress, not your species. You owe her nothing." Jonas thought about Lysa's question. "Why did you save us?" He thought about his answer. Nobody should sleep hungry or afraid. He thought about 3 years of soup and kindness and trying to prove his survival meant something. "Because hatred does not cook soup," he said. Voss stared at him. "What?" "You heard me? Hatred is easy. Hatred is what turned my cargo ship into a debris field. Hatred is what drove you to attack children. Hatred is the laziest emotion in the universe because it requires no thought, no growth, no change." Jonas gestured to the people behind him. "These people followed me here, knowing they would probably die. Not because I promised them power or status or revenge. Because I told them that one child mattered more than politics. That is not hatred, General. That is the opposite. That is weakness. No. Weakness is being so afraid of change that you destroy everything trying to stop it." Illyra spoke then, her voice carrying across the ruined throne room. "General Voss, you were my father's most trusted officer. He believed you embodied our highest values. But those values are exactly what will kill us if we do not adapt. The old ways kept us strong. The old ways made us cruel." She stepped forward, past her guards, standing with Jonas. "This human lost everything to imperial negligence. But when my children needed protection, he gave it freely. He did not demand justice for Vega 6. He did not seek revenge. He chose kindness when he could have chosen hate." She looked at Jonas. And that is why I knelt. Not because he is special, because he showed me that the most powerful force in the universe is not weapons or status or wings that glow in the dark. It is the choice to care when caring costs everything. Touching speech, Voss said coldly, but it changes nothing. He gave the order to fire. Jonas threw himself toward Elira. Sareth moved simultaneously. Their makeshift army surged forward, not to attack but to shield, bodies becoming barriers between power and the Empress, who had dared to believe they mattered. The world dissolved into plasma fire and screaming. Jonas felt impacts, felt burns, felt his body registering damage faster than his brain could process. He kept moving, kept pushing Elira toward cover, kept functioning because that was what you did when children needed you. And the only thing between them and death was your ability to refuse to stop. Then something massive crashed through the ceiling. Imperial reinforcements. Real military. Elite forces that moved like water made violence. They hit the rebel forces from above and behind, overwhelming them through skill and surprise and the fury of soldiers protecting their Empress. The battle was over in seconds. Voss lay dead, weapons still raised. His rebels were captured or fled or joined the bodies already decorating the floor. The throne room fell silent except for the sound of crackling fires and labored breathing. Jonas realized he was on his knees. When had that happened? He looked down. His chest was burning. Not burning. Burned. 3 direct hits at least. He could see bone through the char. That was bad. Elira knelt beside him. Her face was doing something complicated. Jonas, stay with me. Kids okay? He managed. The children are safe. You saved them. Again. Good. That is good. His vision was getting dark around the edges. Sareth appeared on his other side, already calling for medics, her professional calm cracking into something that looked like grief. You did not have to do that, Elira said, her voice breaking. You did not have to shield me. Sure I did. Jonas tried to smile. It hurt. You knelt, remember? Someone had to prove you were right. Jonas? Tell Lysa her soup recipe needs more salt. Tell Ren that baseball is better than whatever sport you people play. Tell them... He coughed. Tasted copper. Tell them I kept my promise. I protected them. All of them. I will tell them. Tears ran down her face. Actual tears. Something Jonas had not known Elisari could produce. I will tell the entire galaxy. Jonas Hale, the human who taught an empire what justice looked like. Oh, just Jonas is fine. The medics arrived. They said words like critical and internal damage and not enough time. Jonas heard them from very far away. He was back in the engine bay of Vega 6, listening to his crew die, wondering why he got to live. Now he knew. He lived so he could die here, 3 years later, protecting people who mattered. That was okay. That was fair. That was something like justice. Continue feeding someone, he whispered to Elira. Please, just continue feeding someone. Then the dark took him, gentle as sleep, final as vacuum. Jonas Hale died on a throne room floor, surrounded by the people he saved, with the Empress of an empire cradling his head and crying for a soup vendor she had known for less than 48 hours. He died how he lived, mattering. 6 months later, Aurelian Prime had transformed, not the architecture. The golden towers still scraped the sky, still caught sunlight and threw it back in weapons of beauty. But the people moving between those towers had changed. Or perhaps what changed was who was allowed to move there. Commander Sareth walked through the district once known as Sector 9. Now it was simply called the Commons, a name that would have been unthinkable before Jonas Hale decided to throw boiling oil at a combat drone. She passed Elisari nobles eating street food beside human workers, saw children of a dozen species playing in parks that used to be restricted by caste, watched as her people, her proud ancient species, learned to see the galaxy through different eyes. The Edicto de Hale had changed everything, Imperatrice Elira had declared it 3 days after the throne room battle, while still recovering from her wounds. The document abolished the caste system that had defined Elisari society for millennia. It declared that no life was inferior to another's hunger. It opened citizenship to any species who called Aurelian prime home. The conservative faction had screamed. Some still screamed, but Elira had something they did not. The moral high ground purchased with human blood. Sareth reached her destination, Cozinha das Estrelas, Kitchen of the Stars. The new plaza occupied what used to be restricted noble gardens. Now it served a different purpose. Every night volunteers distributed food to anyone hungry. Free. No questions. No requirements except need. The Elisari had learned to cook soup. At the center of the plaza stood the statue, iron as requested in the Empress's design brief. Not marble or crystal or any precious material. Just iron, honest and functional and real. Jonas Hale held a pot in both hands, ladle visible inside. His face wore a slight smile, the kind that suggested he was telling a joke, only he understood. Around the statue's base, children played while their parents collected meals. Human, Elisari, others. Sareth approached slowly. She came here every week, same day, same time. A ritual, a remembrance. Commander. A small voice. Sareth turned. Lisa stood there, now 8 years old. Wings developed enough to flutter when she was excited. Behind her, Ren practiced his baseball swing with a stick, copying movements from videos Jonas had left in his personal files. Princess Lisa, Prince Ren, you should not be without security. We are with you, Lisa said reasonably. You are security. Hard to argue with that logic. Sareth had been promoted to Imperial Guard captain after the rebellion. Her first action had been to reform recruitment to include non-Elisari. Her second had been to make sure Jonas's kitchen in the lower districts was preserved exactly as he left it, down to the pot with NCR scratched into the side. Did you bring flowers? Lisa asked, looking at the bundle in Sareth's hands. Yes. Would you like to help me place them? They approached the statue together. Sareth had learned the human custom of leaving flowers for the dead. It seemed appropriate for Jonas, who had understood that small gestures mattered more than grand ones. Do you miss him? Ren asked quietly. Every day. Me too. He promised to teach me about earth sports. He said baseball was like philosophy with hitting. Sareth smiled despite herself. That sounds like something he would say. They arranged the flowers around the statue's base. Already others had left tributes, bowls of soup that would be collected and distributed, notes written in a dozen languages, small offerings that collectively said, "We remember, we learned, we changed." Mother says Jonas defeated us with kindness, Lisa said. I asked what that meant. She said he made us see ourselves clearly, and we did not like the reflection. Your mother is wise. Mother says you knew him best, that you understood why he did what he did. Sareth looked up at the iron face. I think I did. Jonas was someone who survived when he should have died, and that survival made him ask questions most people avoid, like, what makes a life worth living? What makes sacrifice meaningful? When does kindness become power? She touched the statue's base. He answered those questions by feeding children, by protecting those weaker than himself, by choosing care over hate even when hate was easier and more justified. That sounds hard, Ren observed. It was. Jonas was always doing hard things and making them look simple. That was his greatest trick. They stood in silence, watching the plaza fill with evening crowds. People collecting food, people eating together. People who 6 months ago would never have shared space, now sharing meals. Footsteps behind them. Sareth turned, hand automatically moving toward her weapon. Then she relaxed. Imperatrice Elira walked alone, without ceremony, dressed in simple robes that could have belonged to any citizen. Her wings were folded, not displayed. She moved through her own plaza like a ghost, watching her empire learn to care. Your Majesty, Commander, Children, may I join you? They made space. Elira knelt before the statue, touching the iron with reverence usually reserved for holy objects. I come here when I need to remember why we changed, she said quietly. When the nobles complain about lost status, when conservatives threaten rebellion, when the burden of transformation feels too heavy, I come here and look at this face and remember what he said. Continue feeding someone, Lisa quoted softly. Yes, his last words, his final request, not for statues or honors or apologies, just continue feeding someone. Elira's voice caught. Such a simple thing to ask, such a difficult thing to do consistently. Sareth placed a hand on her Empress's shoulder. He believed you would do it. That is why he died protecting you, because he saw something in you worth preserving. I hope I am proving him right. You are. Every day. The plaza lights activated as true darkness fell. The statue illuminated from below, iron catching light and holding it, making Jonas seem almost alive in the glow. Around them, people ate and laughed and argued and lived, all of them participating in the experiment Jonas had started with boiling oil and stubborn compassion. Do you think he knew? Ren asked. That he would change everything? Sareth considered the question. No, I think he was just trying to save two scared kids. The revolution was accidental, which somehow makes it more impressive. Mother says humans specialize in accidental revolutions. Your mother is again very wise. Elira stood, her wings spreading slightly in what Sareth had learned to recognize as contentment. I must return to the palace. There are treaties to sign, reforms to implement, conservatives to convince or remove. The work Jonas started will take generations to complete. But it will be completed, Sareth said with certainty. Yes, because he proved it was possible. Elira looked at each of them. Never forget what he taught us, that power comes from caring when caring costs everything, that the greatest strength is choosing kindness in a universe that rewards cruelty, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is make soup. She departed as quietly as she had arrived, leaving the three of them alone with Jonas's statue and the crowds of people he had inadvertently saved. Lisa leaned against Sareth's side. Commander, if Jonas were still alive, what do you think he would say about all this? Sareth thought about the man who had thrown oil at mercenaries and called it strategy, who had led civilians to battle with nothing but spite and determination, who had died on a throne room floor asking only that someone remember to feed hungry people. I think, she said slowly, he would say his soup recipe still needs work, and that we should stop making such a big deal about basic decency, and that somewhere, someone is probably hungry, so what are we doing standing around talking? Both children laughed. It was a sound Jonas would have liked. They left the plaza eventually, joining the flow of citizens in a city learning to be better than its history. Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky, distant and cold and beautiful. Somewhere among those stars, new crises were forming, new injustices, new opportunities for humans and Elisari and everyone else to prove what they valued most. And somewhere, perhaps, in whatever came after death, Jonas Hale was making soup for souls who needed it, still insisting that hot food was a way of saying, you matter. You always mattered. Even in a universe that kept forgetting, the statue stood silent watch as night claimed Aurelian Prime. Tomorrow the work would continue, the reforms would advance, the empire would keep transforming, slowly and painfully and necessarily, because a soup vendor had decided that two scared children mattered more than political consequences, because an empress had knelt before compassion and refused to stand back up as the same person, because sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply choosing to care. The kitchen of the stars served its 1,000th meal, then its 10,000th. The count would continue growing meal by meal, kindness by kindness, proving that Jonas Hale had not died for nothing. He had died for everything that came after. And that perhaps was the most human thing of all, turning death into seeds for a better future, one bowl of soup at a time. In the growing dark, the iron statue smiled its secret smile, and the universe learned, once again, that humanity's greatest weapon was never violence. It was the stubborn, beautiful, impossible choice to love a world that had given them every reason not to. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was Jonas. In the end, Jonas didn't win a war. He just made soup. But maybe that's the point. Humanity's greatest victories were never built from conquest, only from the stubborn refusal to stop caring when the universe says it's useless. Every empire has its fleets and thrones, but only humans turn grief into generosity and guilt into grace. So what do you feed when the world burns around you? When cruelty feels easier? What keeps you kind? And if compassion costs everything, would you still pay the price? If you've come this far through fire, rebellion, and soup, write soup in the comments so I know you're still here among the living. Tell me your city, your corner of this fragile planet, so we can see how far small kindness travels through the stars. Subscribe if you felt something like a heartbeat you'd forgotten, like the moment an empress knelt before a man who just refused to stop being human. Hit like, share this story if it stirred something you can't quite name, and watch the next tale in the card that's appearing now, because the galaxy still needs a refill.